Hey kids, it's Jurassic James, and on this Jurassic James Explains, looking at Concavenator. So this video is dedicated to Mason and Charlie, who I had a tour with about 3 weeks ago at this point, and they, with their grandmother Penny Harbor, bought me these two figures here. We're going to open one of these. Same rules apply, older models, newer models here, and I will point out the story Concavenator, whose name means pretty much humpback, hunter. When you hear Venator, like Neo-Venator, which is new hunter, Austrovenator, southern hunter from Australia, Venator means hunter. And of course, humpback we'll see in a minute. But they were first discovered in 2003 in what is now Spain. The paper wasn't published and it wasn't named in 2010. So there's a 7-year period of the bones are pulled out of the ground, they're being clean prepped and then written about. That's very common in paleontology. The discovery can happen at one point and the publication way later. So if it was named in 2010, I will point out that Collect A had a 2011 model. This guy here is my first Concavenator. And what struck me with the animal is this little hump right here. Now, if you feel the back of on your back, you'll see these little bumps. Those are called neurospines, basically, for dinosaurs, and they're taller. So, again, we've seen Spinosaurus with neurospines like this, but they're only kind of around the hip at the time known. This particular model, Collect A, is known. The company Collect A is really big to me because they have a lot of unique, unusual species. It's not just T-Rex and Triceratops every year, right? But this one's, it's a smaller figure, and for Concavenator, and it's classified in the Carcharodontosaur group, which we'll go over the family later on, but it's actually one of the more basal. People will say primitive usually, like the earlier design, but we don't say primitive in paleontology because the idea is that when it lived, it was the most advanced member of its group. Yes, we have future relatives that are more adapted or more tuned in, but this animal was adapted to its environment, right? So anyway, what's really cool, of course, it has these three really clear 3 fingers right there. You can also see you have the 3 on the foot, and there is no dew claw, unfortunately. I will point out on my model that leg broke right there. I didn't play with it, nothing. It just broke one day, and I fixed it. But if you look really closely on the arm, these little like feathers. What's really neat is I mentioned this in my Velociraptor video that there's the bone here's called the ulna, the really big bone of the 2 lower bones in your arm. And the ulna had little notches there that we see in other animals that have feathers in them. So the argument is that this guy had feathers, but then they're not distributed the same way. So there's have to be muscles, and other things feathers again. So they're kind of fighting that out right now in paleontology. Fighting as in publishing papers and research. But I want to point out the big deal with this is Concavenator is in the Allosaurian group. Now, when we say Allosauroids, really, when we say dinosaurs that have feathers, they didn't all have feathers. We have evidence of only, particularly, well, mainly, not only, the Allosaurus. Now, Allosaurus are predatory dinosaurs like the raptors and rexes and the Gallimimus, the long ostrich neck-looking ones, the smaller ones in many cases. The Allosaurian type, or Maplesaurus and Spinosaurus, those guys don't show evidence of feathers. So Carcharodontosaurus is in that branch of the predatory dinosaur family tree. And so the idea here is that the fine feathers in this branch, 1 would be a big deal just because, and then 2, it would mean that the common ancestor had feathers too. It's like when Triceratops had these quills, or particularly Stegosaurus, a Triceratops ancestor or like uncle, great uncle, had quills in his tail. That again implies the animal's ancestors had feathers too. So that's why it's very important that they figure this out, right? But anyway, so fast forward, I go to Safari, and this is actually, I think this is on my webpage for the predatory dinosaurs, the theropods. This is actually the model I use. Because it turns out it's not just the one hump we found in the first one. There's like another neural spine here too. So it's theorized in this model that the skin may go all the way down. The question is it a hump like a bison? Is it like a cell, like a Spinosaurus? It seems to be neither. It's kind of a different in the middle thing. But where it sits, I mean, that's when most kids go, is it like a dorsal fin, like when a shark is in the water? But again, I don't know if it swam. So anyway, so again, 3 fingers here. They're all doing the inward hand properly. I like the newer discoveries. Their hands usually are like the correct way. The exceptions to that are the ones that are copying Jurassic Park at this point. The feet have your 3 toes in the front and your dew claw on the side, so that's covered right. The tail is proportioned properly. The specimen found was in the classic dinosaur death pose, meaning its head was pulled up, its tail was up. It's a beautiful image. And that, of course, that comes from when the animal dies, the muscles contract, pulling the head up, pulling the tail up, right? So this is like my favorite one model until more recently. Then Jurassic World. If you didn't know Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom, the volcano one, spoiler, they actually have these toys coming out from that, but they're not in the movie like a live animal in the manner that the house that the final act of the movie. Spoiler again. There are skeletons or skulls and stuff on display in the house, but on the wall behind it, there are these models of like fleshed out models, and they actually show Concavenator for like a split second. So here's my first one I bought of these guys, and it again keeps that one dorsal hump here, one here. That the toy action or feature, if you do that, its tail moves. I think you do the another part. Oh, there it is. If you do the front, the mouth snaps like this. Now, one thing I want to point out is that there are these little ridges here that attach over the interorbital fenestra, the hole before the eye, between the eye and nose. That's really cool. But the one thing, my main complaint with this model is that if you look at it head on, the face is very wide. If you look at any Carcharodontosaur, they have very narrow snouts. I remember I was at the museum on a ladder being weird, and I saw, I was looking at the Acrocanthosaurus skull, very narrow, like this, nothing, not fleshed out. So when I first saw the model, this toy, I remember thinking that. One thing to point out too is this one has 4 fingers for some reason, and the first digit is essentially like a opposable thumb, which is weird. That's not real. But of course, here there are 3 toes in the front, dew claw on the side. That's pretty good. But overall, pretty neat figure. And what they did, of course, is they did a repaint. And as you may already know, I'm a sucker for repaints. So the idea is that you have the same tail moving action here, the same snap. Oh, no, there it is up here. Snapping action here. Now, one thing, more recent review of the skeleton shows that their imprint implies that the scales on the bottom of the tail of Concavenator are triangle shaped. For Triceratops, we see skin that show hexagonal shapes, and for T-Rex, tiny little circles. So these patterns are starting to be well known, but in general, looking at this guy here, I mean, it gets the job done, but it's not as super scientifically accurate. But it's a toy, of course. But of course, it does have that iconic feature of the cell, right? Now we get into our newer guys, the ones that I call the gifts. They literally were gifts. And this is Safari. So the first Safari one was 2013. That was this guy here. And now we have the 2020 Safari, this one. It's made smaller, but it looks more accurate in the sense that there were no spines, from my understanding, that were found, neural spines that were tall here. So it's like one bump and there's like a smaller bump here. So the earlier models show like a skin flap there, maybe. We don't know. I mean, you said, well, maybe there's missing parts. In this case, Concavenator is the most complete of this family group, the Carcharodontosaurs. So that you can see in the skeleton that there's like, it's normal, it's like a normal back here. It's not missing spots. You know, sometimes you have a tail missing because it got washed away by a Pele River. No, that's flat. There seems to be nothing here, and then the tail arcs around the skeleton. The hands are great. They have 3-fingered hands like that. The toes are great. This one's feet are really weird, but it stands just fine. That's really neat about that. But anyway, so whenever I go, this is my advice. When you're buying toys in a store, my wife's always been like, go online. But I like to go to a store and like buy a thing. I'm old school, you know, hunting down, you know, what I want. But I always get the toys and I compare. I'll line them up and see which one stands the best. So this one stayed the best, basically. So anyway, so the skull looks better to me. It's more narrow, more, you know, it's really narrow like this. Again, in many theropod dinosaurs, we see like an overbite, so when they close their mouths, the teeth will stick on the side. This one doesn't show that. There's a whole debate on dinosaur lips that I am not touching. But anyway, but overall, it's a really neat figure. Yeah, thank you, Mason and Charlie. Anyway, so our next guy is this one here. Now this is something I don't normally buy because I don't normally like to buy the ones with the base, you know, like the little Green Army Man have a little base on it. I prefer freestanding figures. But I saw this guy here, and this, I can't remember his name, is Jurassic Hunters. And they, you know, and they have a lot of different kind of. I've bought some of their models since then. So the package says Jurassic Hunters. There's a Concavenator, of course. You have the you know, the obligatory kid playing with it. He's not very happy. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, so here's the paleontologist they consult, or at least their spokesperson. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that now. And let's see. I mean, really, he doesn't look like he's really enjoying. That's kind of weird. Anyway, so let's get the opening here. And there's always data in multiple languages on the back. So first and foremost, you get this Jurassic Hunter collection. Paleontologist approved, very nice. That's the goal on it. In fact, me one of those guys who approve toys. And of course, it gives you the catalog because if you bought one, you should buy them all. Also, they have these multi-language. I have other figures of this company. Multi-language. You can make a book basically. So the goal is to collect them all, like Pokemon. and it tells you fun facts about the animal and all that. But you have me here right now. So let's see, we pull out the actual model, and it sits like this. So that new toy smell. Anyway, so one thing to point out, wow, this is really bold neural spines here. The skull, it's okay. It gets some points across. I mean, like I said, the hands are palm to palm. The feet are pretty narrow. Again, for the quadrupedal, four-legged animals, they usually have no base, so they can stand. But for bipeds, 2-foot animals, they have trouble balancing them, so they have to put the base on them like this. But you know, the metatarsals are really nice. I don't see a dew claw, the third finger there. Sorry, the first toe, the one. So when you see a predator like a T-Rex foot, they would have had, their ancestors had all 5 digits. So this is like the right foot. So it's like this. So the 3 that are walking on are these 3, and this will be the dew claw, the little tiny one there. This finger or this digit actually on the Tyrannosaurus skeleton is a little notch right over here. You can see that remnant of that where it's pulled away. So you're seeing like this. That's why I call this one the first. It's on the inside, first toe. So it isn't showing that here. I don't see it at all. Yeah, I don't see it. So again, there's that tall neural spine. And one thing to point out too is that these neural spine structure could be a sign of, the one they found could have been a male, you know, display feature, or female display feature. It could have been fully adult, you know, it seems the skeleton seems to show adult features. It was only about 5.8 or 6 meters long, so about 19, 22 feet. So it's very small for a Carcharodontosaur, but it gets one of the earlier ones. On that note, I will talk about who they are and why they're here. So I will use, well, to scale, not the best scale, but so here we have a Concavenator. And so they're closely related to the Britain's Neovenator. This is another Carcharodontosaur found that hunts iguanodons. And again, as far as I always go over the ecology too, they don't make toys of the animals that they live with. I think this guy was so iconically different, yet had a good family relationship that they made a toy of it. But you know, the future is untold, right? Unwritten. So these guys are on the same age, early Cretaceous period, Europe, Spain, England, and they're hunting iguanodonts and probably sauropods, or at least scavenging sauropods. Their more famous relatives are the family namesake itself, North Africa's Carcharodontosaur. I've done a video on this guy already, I believe. And the idea is that this one, you know, pretty large model, largest non-Jurassic World model I have. It's from North Africa, living with Spinosaurus. The South America, we have Giganotosaurus, which people often mispronounce Gigantosaurus. It's Giganotosaurus. And I say it because the guy who Rodolfo Correa in the documentary goes Giganotosaurus, so he says it that way. That way it's true. Another more popular relative, it's called, or on the rise of popularity, Maplesaurus. So these guys are the giants that are like 42, 43 feet long. They're really huge animals. Giganotosaurus, I will do a video on that one. Jurassic World's coming out in June, and and it's the main protagonist or antagonist. So I'm going to do a thing when the toy comes out. And then their North American cousin is called Acrocanthosaurus. So this is the lineage or family group, or family, really, that Concavenator lives in, basically. It's classified in. These guys are the later, more extant versions, or extant for their time. You know, but these guys, you know, he's closer to this guy than this. It's like a branching thing. And so that's what you're looking at as far. So they all have these really narrow snouts, or these large predators. And again, I call the Carcharodontosaurs the heirs to the Allosaurus. So the Allosaur body type, that plan, that genre, is late Jurassic. North America especially, but we find South Africa, Europe, you know. And then after the Jurassic ends and Cretaceous period begins, like these guys are that lineage of Allosaur type, but they're their own branching, so therefore they exist, and they spread out too. I don't recall any of these guys found in Asia, but South America, Africa, Europe, you know, Europe, North America, South America, Africa, they're covered. So I think the Allosaurus like retreated to Asia and then spread out from there, you know. But anyway, so here's a general view of this animal Concavenator. It's a really unusual dinosaur, really weird dinosaur. Often referred to as a camel dinosaurs. That's not a relationship thing, just the hump, you know, storing energy. But of course, maybe mate selection, because that's always the go-to answer for paleontologists. If it's weird, it's for mating selection. And I often think about human behavior, which is always the atypical. But like whenever someone's doing something weird, it's like follow the money, or relationships for animals in nature. It's like, what's weird about it? It's probably mating thing, you know. Anyway, that being said, thank you for tuning in. I will see you next week. We're going to go over Triceratops, a full story Triceratops, a full table of Triceratops models. So a lot of them up there. So I'll see you then.